Hey guys, what's up? I am here with a review of an exploitation, slasher, mystery, crime, thriller film that is based on a true story, directed by the man who wrote Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, the Bob Clark film. I'm pretty sure it was Bob Clark. Yeah, Bob Clark. The Bob Clark film, he wrote the screenplay for it, I believe. He also wrote the screenplay for Porky's 2, which is a sequel that I think is pretty underrated. He also was although he was uncredited, he was the co-director on the cult slasher film from the early 90s, Popcorn, which I absolutely loved. And this is one of his few directorial, attempts. This one is from 1974, and it is called Deranged, Confessions of a Necrophile. Now, there are a lot of films out there that are kind of based on or inspired by the infamous murderer Ed Gein. People often classify him as a serial killer, but the fact is he only killed 2 people, so he does not classify as a serial killer, just a murderer. But Ed Gein, even though he's probably not the most ferocious, vicious, and disturbing murderer in human history, there have been more films based on Ed Gein than any other serial killer. And now, for those of you who don't know, Ed Gein inspired Norman Bates in the classic Hitchcock film Psycho. He also inspired Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. And most importantly, he inspired the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And, there are a lot of people that, and I even know a couple of them that when they saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre, not the original but the remake, and they saw that it was inspired by a true story, they thought that everything in it was 100% factual and accurate. But it is not. From what I've heard, this is like the only film to ever really get the story of Ed Gein correctly. I've seen a couple of these films myself, obviously the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. Silence of the Lambs, Psycho, Motel Hell was partially inspired by him. There are a lot of films. Even the one where Kane Hodder plays Ed Gein, the Butcher of Plainsfield, which was a pretty bad movie in general. But there is not really a movie out there that portrays Gein as Gein. This is one of the first times it has actually happened, and I'm genuinely interested. And with the title being Deranged, Confessions of a Necrophile, I'm kind of hoping that there's some necrophilia in the film that would help, not help with the film, but it would definitely give the film a nice kind of edge and make it very, I guess, disturbing. But without further ado, let's sit back and check out Deranged, Confessions of a Necrophile. So the movie opens up with music and credits over a shot of the farmhouse that the character of Ed Gein lives in. And then we are introduced to a character who is basically like our narrator, and he comes in at times to basically just tell us what is, not tell us the obvious, like what's going on, but give us a bit more information about the characters and what's going on in the scene. And this guy is supposed to be like a trained, like, professional, like he's supposed to be one of the people that actually worked on the Ed Gein case. And he gives a warning at the beginning of the film claiming that the film is not for the, faint of heart, not for the squeamish, and that this film is accurate to the original case in shocking detail. Now, there's some things changed in this movie. It's mentioned right away that, like, right in the beginning of the film, it says the film you're about to see is based on true events, names, locations, names of victims, the killer, locations, etc. have all been changed. You know, have all been altered slightly. So instead of his name being Ed Gein, it's Ezra Cobb, or Ez for short. Now, Ez lives with his mother, obviously, much like the actual story, and he is obsessed with her, and she's dying, and he is taking care of her. And when she suddenly dies, obviously Ez is very, very upset, as a lot of people would be. But so far, the film has been pretty accurate in its portrayal of Gein, based on what I've read about him. You know, he was a mama's boy. He really, really loved his mother. He could not live without her at all. She told him to stay away from women because women were evil, and yada, yada, yada. So a year passes, and Ez becomes very, very lonely and kind of just distant, and he stops being a farmer, you know, gives up farming. He gave up farming the day his mother died, and becomes a handyman. I forget if that's accurate or not, but I'm pretty sure Ed Gein had a job. But he becomes a handyman, and he becomes very depressed and lonely without his mother, and he starts hearing his mother's voice from beyond the grave. So he goes to dig up his mother's corpse and keep the corpse in the house as if she's still alive, much like in Psycho and Don't Go in the House, and I'm pretty sure in the actual true story as well. So, something I got wrong when I introduced the film. Apparently a necrophile is not someone who likes to have sex with corpses. A necrophile, by definition, is a person that has an obsession with, you know, death or dead things. So, or things of a kind of macabre nature. So I was kind of wrong there, and Ed Gein never experimented with necrophilia, which I didn't know that. I always figured because he was a grave robber and because he made, you know, bowls and belts out of nipples and suits of human flesh and, you know, stuff like that, and ate his cereal out of a human skull, I figured he would just go the full, like, 9 yards and go fucking necrophiliac on us. But apparently he didn't. So yeah, the title is a bit misleading. There's no actual necrophilia, but because the actual definition of a necrophile is someone who's obsessed with death, dead things, or the macabre, it's still not that. It's still very true to what the story's about. So let's get down to business. The acting in this film. The acting is actually pretty decent all around. Everybody turns in a pretty good performance, especially the guy who is playing playing Ezra Cobb. And if you don't know who the actor is, I can't remember the guy's name, but I did a bit of research as I was watching the movie because he looked familiar. And if you've seen the first Home Alone movie, you remember the creepy neighbor that they think is like a serial killer? He plays that creepy neighbor in Home Alone. So the same guy that played that creepy neighbor portrayed Ed Gein in probably the most accurate way possible. He obviously turns in the very best performance in the film, doing a very good job of portraying Ed Gein's madness. The writing is also not that bad either. There's even a bit of humor written into the film, which I didn't expect going into this film. I didn't think there was going to be anything humorous about it. I thought it was going to be a very dark film. And indeed it was, but there's some pretty dark scenes that are just absolutely hilarious, and I will admit had me giggling quite a bit. It's definitely a surprise. It's like a dark, somewhat of a dark comedy, and it really helps the film, and kind of helps with the portrayal of Gein as a person. The scenes are usually made funnier by the things Ezra says. The characters are entertaining, and I'll even admit, the character of Ezra Cobb, even though he's absolutely despicable, he's a very interesting character, and one that is very entertaining, and there weren't any annoying characters in the movie, so that is always a plus. The effects in this movie are also really, really good. Everything from a technical standpoint, sound mix, lighting, camera work, music, etc. are all very, very solid. No real problems here. The pacing is really, really good. The movie has a nice, it has a nice feel, and look. It has a lot of good tension and atmosphere to it. And the music also really helps because it keeps a creepy tone. All in all, while this isn't the most accurate portrayal of the case, it's still the closest, it's still the closest that I've seen in a actual film that isn't a documentary. So I can give the film that. On the gore meter from 1 to 10, 1 being something like Nosferatu, and 10 being something like Brain Dead. Deranged is probably a 3. It really isn't that graphic of a film. It's more of a really creepy movie. I mean, when it does get graphic, there's like maybe 2 scenes in particular I could think of where things get graphic. Other than that, it's mostly just kind of, you know, rotting corpses sitting around. And that's really it. This is a really, really, really good horror flick, and probably one of the best slasher flicks of the 70s, and I will definitely have the gall to say that it is a far superior film to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, most definitely. Although these two films, although this and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre are quite different, they're still, you know, based on or inspired by Ed Gein. So, yeah, this one's far superior to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I would highly recommend it. It definitely, if you're looking for a lesser-known slasher flick, because this one is definitely one of the best, like, lesser-known ones. Like, and for it having such a low budget, it's still a really well-made movie. And I still really, really liked it. I'd probably have to give it a 5 out of 5. It's really, really awesome. I would highly recommend you check it out if you're interested. And there's a Blu-ray release of this movie out, a new Blu-ray release that literally came out not even 4 days ago. It came out 4 days ago. Well, nah, not 4 days ago, but 6. Or 7. Well, I guess it's 8 now because it's the 15th, because I'm recording this at midnight, but it came out 8 days ago, the new Blu-ray of this movie. The movie's finally on Blu-ray, and yes, most definitely I will be picking it up. So, I'm gonna go edit this video and maybe sleep. So anyway, guys, if you liked the video, like my channel, be sure to like this video, favorite it, whatever you want, and maybe subscribe perhaps. I would really, really appreciate that. And check the links in the description below. There are links to things like my Tumblr, Twitter, all that, Facebook. All that is in the description below. Hey there, kids. Do you want to get cool stuff in the mail like this? Or this? Or even this? Well, then subscribe to Horror Block today. Have you ever wanted to do cool cosplays like this, or even this? Well, now you can. Subscribe to Moonchild Cosplay on YouTube, and you can see all her tutorials on how to do cool stuff like this. Do you want to get cool horror and exploitation film t-shirts like this? Or this? Or this? Well, then go to RottenCotton.com to check out all of their premium t-shirts.